Hi everybody. In this video, we're going to look at one of the most important things you have when it comes to creating cool and realistic looking animations. And that thing is something known as easing functions. And we're going to learn all about it. So let's get started. So before we jump right into looking at easing functions, let's do a short review of what animations are. An animation is a visualization of properties changing over a period of time. You probably already know that if you've been reading my articles or watched some of my earlier videos. Now let's look at an example of what exactly I'm referring to just to put it all together. So here I have a blue circle and it's moving left and right. This is actually a CSS animation that you can see implemented on the left hand side. So it's very easy to see that the property that is changing is the position. And more specifically, the property that is changing, the transform property, where I'm setting the x position of the translate 3D function to change over a period of the duration of the animation. And speaking of which, this animation's duration is set to 4 seconds. So every 4 seconds, it starts at 0, moves right by 300 pixels, and returns back to 0. And it loops infinitely. And that's the animation that you're seeing. So what you have are some properties that are changing. You have them changing over a period of time. And with those two things, you have the key ingredients for simple animation. Now, there's more to animation than just the properties that are changing and how long they take to change. You have one very important detail, and that is the rate at which properties change. And the rate at which properties change has a name, actually has two names depending on your background. It is known as a timing function or an easing function. The thing is, when creating animations, especially in the beginning, we often assume that the properties change linearly. In real life, rarely is that the case. When things are moving, they don't move linearly. They have some acceleration, they have some deceleration, they have some bounce, they have some liveliness. And the goal of the animations we create should be to try to be as realistic as possible, unless you're deliberately going for the artificial, robotic, and very mechanical feel, which I'm assuming you probably aren't always going to be going for. And the thing that helps change an animation from being the boring and robotic look is an easing function. So easing functions come in various shapes and sizes. You saw a linear one just here, and here you have one where the properties are changing much more rapidly at the very beginning, and they start to slow down or decelerate as you get more towards the end. Now, the container through which we're going to be thinking about easing functions for what we're going to be doing is through what CSS is capable of. So when creating animations and transitions in CSS, you do have a lot of control over the easing function you want to use. Just to get a little ahead of myself here, you have a handful of easing functions you can use. You can even define your own custom easing function if the built-in ones here, ease, linear, ease in, out, step start, and the rest of them, if they don't quite suit your needs. Okay, so what we've just done is looked at an overview of what easing functions are and how they change how your animation will behave. So let's pivot a little bit and look at the next step in what we want to learn, and that is how to actually use easing functions in the animations and transitions that you're going to specify. So the way of using easing functions is slightly different depending on whether you're looking at a CSS animation or a CSS transition. We look at them both starting with the CSS animation. In the shorthand approach, the easing function is specified just after the duration. As you can see here, I have the animation property and I have the animation name, the duration, and I'm using the ease in easing function to specify how this particular animation will change its various properties. And for the longhand version of it, you actually have an explicit property that defines what easing function you want to use. And for animations, that is the animation timing function property. And I set it, in this case, to the ease out easing function. So to see all this in action, let's go back to our example. I have another example here. This example has two circles that are basically moving from left to right. The first circle should be very familiar to you. It is the same blue circle from the simple animation you saw a moment ago. It just has a friend right below it, the circle labeled B, that is also moving from left to right. They're both identical except for one thing. They each have a different easing function specified. So by default, circle A is, I'm currently in my code, I'm highlighting the animation property that defines circle A. And right now I'm highlighting the animation property for circle B. And notice that there's a timing function for circle B, and that is set to ease in. For circle A, there is no timing function specified. And this is an important detail. By default, if you don't specify an animation timing function, or the equivalent of it for a transition, a default easing function is provided for you. And in Chrome and in most other browsers, the standard easing function you should get is ease. Well, the default easing function is great. Let's go and change it to something different. I'm going to specify a timing function for circle A, animation timing function. I'm going to use the full property name, even though I could just have provided the easing function as part of the shorthand declaration. And let's go ahead and let's choose linear, just to give you an idea what linear looks like. And so right now the page has been refreshed, and you can see that circle A now is moving left and right, except the way the properties are changing is they're changing linearly. And circle B is also moving left and right, and its property changing using the easing function. And you can see that just like before, both of them start and end at the same time. It's what happens in the middle that is very different. If I change it from linear to ease out, you'll see another slightly different variation where the animation starts off really quickly and then slows down in the case of circle A, or it starts slowing up and then speeds up towards the end, which is the hallmark of the easing function that you have with circle B. So let's go back to the next version of what we're trying to look at, and that is transitions. Everything you've seen that applies for animations also applies to transitions. And just like before, the shorthand version of a transition has the easing function defined after the duration. So here I have a transition property. The property it's listening for is transform. Over a period of 0.5 seconds, whatever the transition I'm caring about will take place, and it'll take place through the rate change defined by an easing function. And if you want to have a longhand version of it, similar thing, you have another timing function property. In this case, it is a transition timing function, and I have specified the easing function as a value this particular property will get. So in a future video, I'll explain more about what easing functions are, how they behave, and how to create your own custom easing function as well. But for now, just remember, you have a lot of ways for defining a really cool animation. The two most important things are the properties to animate and how long it takes for that part of your properties to animate, the duration. And the latest thing you learned about is the other really important thing, and that is the easing or timing function that you specified as well. So if you want to learn more about easing functions, just go to Krupa.com and search for easing. If you need any help, post on the forums at forum.krupa.com, and you can find me all over the internet. You can find me on Twitter with the @Krupa, Facebook, or YouTube. And of course, if you found this particularly interesting, you should totally check out my book, Animation in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It has a whole bunch of pages devoted to just creating animations as well as easing functions as well. And you can find them on Amazon on paperback and Kindle editions. And with that, I will see you all later.